Lord dread of the underworld, Father of life, Father of death, join us this night, I pray. Descend into this, the body of thy priest.
We are a circle within a circle with no beginning and never ending.
They are called pagans, neo-pagans, witches, druids, shamans, nature worshippers, and a host of other titles. More correctly, they are European-American, pre-Christian magical practitioners. Most are white, lower to middle class, and well-educated. They are the flower children of the 1960s grown up to face a new century. They espouse a faith that belongs to their ancestral roots, deal in psychic matters, and practice rituals that may even predate civilization itself. Not everyone you will see considers himself to be a witch or pagan. Some are simply part of the related New Age movement. All believe in the realms of the psychic, the spirit world.
Wicca is an evolved religion that stems from the ancient pagan religions of Western Europe.
I became interested in finding out what the state of the pagan community, and I use that term loosely, was at the turn of the millennium, because it had changed so much since I had gotten involved with it over the last 2 decades. I decided to stick to my home region of southeastern Wisconsin as a test sample. This is what I found. Spring floods bring new life in their wake, replacing the old, a tenet in modern witchcraft. Wicca, as it is now called, was rediscovered by anthropologist Margaret Murray early in the 20th century when she found groups or covens still practicing their traditions in the British Isles. Gerald Gardner made it public after World War II. It became popular for the first time in the United States during the 1960s.
So about 4 years ago, I came to the understanding in Chicago that there was a need for an open and public circle of people on the South Side. And so I started by trying to organize people into a drumming circle with a little bit of ritual. And it started with about 10 people, and within the space of about 1.5 to 2 years, grew to about 200 people with a little drumming and a lot of rituals. So it just sort of switched itself. And in the course of the past 4 years, we stand at a membership of about 300 people. We meet once a month, and better it be when the moon is full, for full moon ritual and drumming. We get about 80 to 100 people on average at the circles, and we're publishing a newsletter 8 times a year just to keep people abreast of community events. So what we're trying to build is community in the South Side specifically of Chicago.
I started out in paganism at a time in my life when my mother was dying of cancer, and so in a way I found my heavenly mother as I was losing my earthly mother.
If you were to travel within the pagan community and ask them what is important to them, most would tell you they would like to be heard. Therefore, this film is about people talking, people telling their side of the story, people trying to be heard. You won't see very much in the way of exotic ritual practices or magical manifestations. This is not an introduction to witchcraft. This is about the people who participate in the practice. I see this as both a communication device, these are your neighbors, as well as a kind of time capsule. This is the way Midwestern pagans were at the turn of the millennium. 20 years from now, this may all be different. How different is for the future to decide.
I remember there was this big oak tree in a friend of mine's yard, and I remember we used to go to that oak tree and kneel down in front of it and kind of worship it. And we didn't know what we were doing at the time, but later on, as I got older and started learning more about these things, I found out that there's actually a name for what I believed in, and it was basically, it started out with feeling this intense bond with nature. And especially around springtime, I felt like, you know, people really needed to go out and get wild and crazy and celebrate, but that never happened here in Wisconsin. Later on, when I was learning about paganism, I learned all about rites of spring and wild Dionysian frenzies and things like that, and that people actually did these kinds of things. The way I was formally introduced to paganism, organized paganism, I guess, was through the old Sanctum Regnum on Milwaukee Street, and that was right in the early 80s. They were just closing down, but there was a notice there. There were some people on the east side who were looking for members for their group, and the first official pagan ritual I went to was at Circle Sanctuary in the old Gates of Heaven building. And I remember being a part of it and thinking, yeah, this is what I am, this is what I've been looking for. And I didn't know this had a name, but now I know what it is. We were introduced through Circle Sanctuary. Thank you, Selena.
And my own journey into Wiccan spirituality began when I was very young. As a child, I found that when I spent quiet time in a natural setting, that I had spiritual experiences. I felt at peace, and I connected more fully with intuitive wisdom within myself. Also, as a child, I had dreams that some people might call psychic dreams or extraordinary dreams. I had out-of-body experiences, precognition, and very vivid and lucid dreams where I was aware that I was dreaming while I was dreaming. I've been intrigued with the spiritual dimensions of nature since the earliest days of my life, and I continue to be, and that's very much a central part of my practice as a witch.
We call ourselves Phoenix Fire. We've been calling ourselves that for 2 months now. But we started a long time ago. Kevin and I and 2 other people who are no longer in the state of Wisconsin started a coven about 21 years ago, wasn't it, Kevin?
1980.
It's not, of course, stayed the same over that time. We were a coven together for a while, and then we each went independent, solitary for a while, and we came back together and lost a couple people and gained others through, well, just people who knew other people and so on, until at one point we were about 13, 14, and then the ones who were not really serious about it sort of drifted away, and this is the core. This is what's left.
The one neat thing about some pagans is that they're well read, and they're not very, they're spread out all over, and there's people doing group things, and there's people doing individual things, and so when you run into someone that has your same beliefs, you're like, oh, wow, that's so cool.
I wasn't raised in a Christian church, so I didn't feel any kind of conflict with the religion I grew up with. I think my journey as an anthropologist was for me to find the religion that I felt was right for me, because my focus was always on that, and I thought it was an academic focus, but eventually I realized there was also a personal focus, and I was trying to find the religion that felt comfortable for me. So it took off from there, and I decided not to be an anthropologist anymore, and I decided I was going to be a therapist, so I started a master's program in social work in Madison here. I spent so much of my childhood in the woods. I've been making altars since I was a kid. I just didn't know that's what I was doing. I was also very much interested in women's mysteries at the time. I was trying to find a way to respect women's cycles and a way to ritualize women's cycles. And so a lot of my background comes from the women's spirituality path of paganism.
Part of the reason I majored in psychology as an undergraduate at College of Mary, I think, was really to try to get a sense of what is that about? How does that fit? The intuitive part of consciousness. And I've had mystical experiences throughout most of my life, and one of the reasons that I have found a spiritual home within Wiccan spirituality and the larger pagan culture of which it's part is there is a real acceptance for diversity. There's an honoring of the intuitive as well as the intellect. There's an emphasis on balance, and yes, it's an equal opportunity religion as well. And today being Women's Equality Day, and as somebody who is very involved in the movement for not only racial equality, but gender equality, environmental protection, going way back to the 60s and 70s, and it's continuing part of my mix, I found that within this form of culture and this form of spirituality, those social justice values can be part of that, and there's not a big conflict. And it's wonderful, as I've gotten out into the larger interfaith world, to find out how many people from many other religions also embrace those concepts and those values. So I don't see so much I shifted from being a Southern Baptist to being a pagan as much as I continue to draw a wider and wider circle for the spirituality that I'm part of. And so I'm comfortable within a pagan setting, but I also enjoy being with people of many different paths and belief systems, because I find if I hear from other people about how they see the world, it helps me understand our diversity, and it's yet one more facet of the larger crystal that I really see is what you might call it the great wheel of life, or the way things are. Some people do find pagan culture, Wiccan spirituality, as a result of a quest where we've all kind of talked about connections. I really thought that I was the only person really attuned to these ways until I started looking at some of the old ways of celebrating nature that were rooted in the classics. So not only is there a psychology influence in my life, but also the classics. By studying Greek and Latin and the classics, Greco-Roman culture, I had a spirituality and a philosophy that made sense to me, that gave me more breathing room as a Southern Baptist. I had a calling to be a minister, and as a Southern Baptist, it wasn't an option if you were female to get ordained. So, and I also love to dance and sing and get exuberant in my spirituality, and I was raised in a Baptist church where you weren't allowed to dance. So I found that I needed for myself to quest more, and certainly for me it happened pretty early in my life. And for other people I know, they're at the latter part of their life. They're retired. They've reached a point where they really want to turn inward and connect with some of their intuitive abilities, and they all of a sudden discover contemporary paganism and say, oh, well, this is what I need now for my life. And certainly it's one of the forms of pagan culture honors people as they get older. Mainstream American society, it's changing. With my generation, the boomer generation, I'm the old one here, where our numbers are so huge, and we have a view of aging saying, well, why not be vital into our elder years? Yeah, well, we're changing the face of aging. But actually, if you look at nature religions, honoring the elders, whether it's within a Native American or a European American, an African context, that is something that's pretty much across various nature traditions. And you honor your elders rather than saying, okay, you're used up, shut you up in the nursing home, forget it, we're going to go off and really put the emphasis on youth. I honor youth as well, though. I don't think you have to be a real gray-haired to have wisdom. I think we have wisdom whatever our age.
I'm 21 years old. I work for a local roofing company here, right in Saukville area. I work in the gutter department. I've got just basic interests: guitar, martial arts, poetry.
Take my heart and fill it with love. Let me see the world above. Ease the burden from my back. Turn my blue skies into black.
I'm a real big camper. I spent good 10 years in the Boy Scouts. Made it almost all the way up to Eagle. I just love the outdoors. There's just something that appeals to me that you can't really get inside the house. Where you need the open air around you. You need to walk within trees. And it's not even really any outdoors. It's got to be in the woods. I don't like going camping down in Florida because, I don't like having the sand underneath your feet. You gotta have, the dirt.
I'm a guitarist. I have been for about 11 years. I used to do a lot of art, kind of cut back on that for the longest time. Now I'm starting to pick it up again. Starting to paint, stuff like that. I do a lot of poetry, write my own music. Been in probably about 1 million bands. I'm basically a drifter at heart. This is the first time I actually settled down anywhere for a year on my own account. Every year I usually go through a new job. Usually end up quitting because I get bored. Right now I'm slinging hides over at the Cudahy Tannery. Tanning them and buffing them and fun stuff like that. Really boring, tedious work. What else?
As far as being a psychic thing goes, I was born psychic. In fact, there's a part of me that can't understand how people function without it, or why people don't know what's going to happen. It's a strange talent, very simply because you can try and run away from it, but it will always pursue you, it will always find you, it will always be there. Which I kind of exhibited this ability, and my mother always said, oh, she's fey, very simply because I would say things that subsequently came true. And it didn't occur to me that this was anything out of the ordinary until I was, maybe about 9, 10, 11, when people would start to give me weird looks because I knew what was going on in their life without them telling me, or I'd blurt out loud something that they'd been thinking. Of course, going to Catholic school didn't help that too much. It was definitely not encouraged or nurtured. So it started me on, I want to say, a very early age, probably 9, 10, a lifelong quest to understand not only the talent that I had, but the other mysteries of the universe.
The craft has been an important part of my life for a long time, since I've basically been about 10 or 12 years old. I've had an interest in metaphysics and the occult, and that naturally evolved into an interest in the craft. My craft name is Rhiannon, or Lady Rhiannon. There are about 950 million Rhiannons in the world, but we like to think all of us are unique, and the goddess is in every woman, and every woman is a reflection of a goddess, and that's an important part in my own development. My background is I was raised Catholic, very strict Catholic. I think it fed into my understanding of the use of symbolism and understanding the use of one divine force that is sometimes compartmentalized into sort of different departments in understanding things, and the Catholics do that quite effectively by having patron saints for this, that, and the other. And so it feeds in pretty well towards a concept of understanding different aspects or dimensions of God or goddess in Wiccan concepts as well.
I was born and raised in Denver, Colorado. My name is Dana Gass. I'm also known as Kamala, or the Lady Kamala to some people. That is a nickname I was given in college. It's a Hindi name, which means lotus flower. Because I'm an aromatherapist and herbalist, it's very appropriate. I was raised Jewish, with some interesting superstitions floating around my family, which I haven't been able to trace and I'm still very curious about. I always knew I wasn't anything that my family wanted me to be. And from a very early age I was fascinated with anything occult, anything metaphysical, and anything Asian. I went to Harvard, and I graduated with honors at Harvard with a degree in East Asian Studies. The major reason I was studying East Asian Studies is I was fascinated with all things Chinese and Asian in general. I studied a lot of Eastern religion and wrote a lot of papers on Eastern religion. I traveled in China, I traveled in India after college, and got a better idea of what that was really all about. And started in high school, way back in high school, practicing what I would then have referred to as Wicca. But when I got more learned in the Asian religions, it became a little more muddied. I discovered Hinduism too, and I studied quite a bit of that. I started practicing in high school and have been practicing ever since then. And it was my first year here at the Bristol Renaissance Fair that I was approached by about 30 people about having a full moon circle here at the fair after hours.
I've only been into this a little over a year, basically because my husband had gotten me interested. I wasn't satisfied with what I was practicing before. I was a member of the Grace Presbyterian Church here in town.
By town,
Green Bay.
Green Bay. And what about that didn't seem to satisfy you at the time?
People seemed hypocritical, two-faced, so to speak. Nice and pleasant to you on Sunday morning when you appeared in church, but no word during the week, or if you're absent for a time, no call or anything to find out whether you're alive or dead. Religion-wise, I guess I wasn't. It was okay. I think it was just the people, the experience there that turned me off.
My background is very strange and unusual, to say the least, because of the fact that because of political issues and my being brought into this country from a foreign country, I was supposed to have been raised Roman Catholic. Unfortunately, they did not get away with it, and those that brought me into this country and adopted me, who were supposed to raise me Roman Catholic, put me into the hands of people in their absence when they had to go to work to have others raise me for them. And it was the people that I was surrounded with that helped me in the time of my rearing, were in actuality a secret society.
People will often ask me, when did I know I was psychic? Because I do a lot of readings and that sort of thing, and they sort of, people still have this idea that if that people aren't psychic and that it requires some kind of like blunt trauma to the head or some near-death experience or some other odd occurrence, maybe with some hallucinogenic, who knows, then suddenly one becomes psychic, and then you sort of like have this event that you know, yeah, this is when. And that has always been, to me, an extremely odd question, because to me the question is, when did you discover you weren't psychic? It's a question I usually have for them. Too often people see psychic ability as a talent, or I'm sorry, as a power as opposed to a talent. It's certainly not a power, it's nonsense. It's a talent like any other talent. And everyone, I usually say it this way, everyone in the world is psychic. There are only two types of people, those that use it and those that deny it. And if you don't perceive yourself as being psychic, it's because someone's gone out of their way to train you not to be. Certainly there are different degrees of talent. You know, not everyone sits down at the piano and plays like Mozart. Not all people with psychic ability should or ought to become professionals. At least with professionals you expect someone to have a modicum of talent, although even that's not often the case, from what I've seen in the community anyway. Often a good gift of gab is about all one really needs. And certainly to put up a neon sign, ESP Reader Advisor, is going to attract a lot of attention, but 90% of the time these people are crooks.
What happened with me is I encountered my grandmother working with her at Salagialusininahe, Cherokee Spirit Stones, a set of 49 gemstones. And she was working magic with them when I came upon her. She just shushed me up, though, just told me to be quiet, she didn't threaten my life, and made me sit reverently or quietly while she continued her little ceremony with the stones, doing some magic and some divination. And after finishing it, she said that this very ritual she had just done, this divination she had completed, was about whether or not I should be initiated into the path of shamanism that she had walked herself since being a little girl, initiated by both her father and her mother. And the divination had told her, in fact confirmed, that I should be initiated into the craft, and that since I had been pronounced legally dead for 55 minutes, literally brain dead, that this somehow marked me as a seer and appropriate for schooling or tutoring in shaman.
My personal involvement with the pagan Chicago community would happen as part of a process. I used to be in politics. Well, I still am in politics. I used to work for a state senator. And when I was about 26 years old, that life really started to get to me in the sense of the difficulties of it and everything else. And I was very agnostic at the time. I went to looking for, and I would eventually quit that job. I would start teaching tarot cards and start doing tarot cards in my house again. And slowly but surely, I would be asked to go to a psychic fair and work at a psychic fair. And I would meet a gentleman by the name of Reverend Don Lewis. And he kept talking about his religion, his faith, and his family's faith, which ended up being paganism, Wicca. Correllian Wicca at that. And he slowly but surely brought me in and taught me that these are the things I wanted to do. About a year into it, I would open up my first temple along with Don called the Universal Life Church of Gaia. And we would begin a process of being involved.
This is where it all began for me some 20-odd years ago, and where it began for a lot of people in the Milwaukee area. This is the seed of what had begun to be the magical movement in Milwaukee. The original owner of this place was not willing to come on camera due to the fact that he had threats against his life placed against him over the years. We were also unsuccessful at acquiring the permission of the present owners to photograph their shop, which is why you're seeing so little of it.
During the Roman Empire, a pagus was a rural district governed by a fort, garrison, or county seat. The people who lived in the district were the pagani, or pagans. During the Middle Ages, with the rise of the cities and of Christian Roman Catholic civilization, any non-Christian was considered uncivilized and referred to as a pagan. This applied equally to Jews, Muslims, Protestants, and Orthodox Catholics. During the Renaissance, pagan came to mean devil worshipper. These days, the word pagan has a nebulous meaning that still implies barbarian, and some alternative lifestyle people take it on as a badge of honor.
It's really an amalgamation of a number of things in these influences. The root religions of the British Isles, the old fairy faith, the peoples that built Stonehenge and the Cairn. It has a very strong influence from the Druids and the old Celtic beliefs. There was magical and religious ideas that came back from the Crusades, with the Crusaders, from the old Saracens, and there was the medieval French religion impinges on it. Even up to today, the modern women's movement has helped to bolster the image of the goddess in it to the point where most neo-pagans today and most Wiccans tend to focus on the goddess rather than the god, whereas hereditary religions, the British Isles, focused almost completely on the god. These kinds of religions, I really think, started in Central Asia, but it's wider than that. It goes back to where religion came from in the first place. As far back as I can trace, religion is about 500,000 years to the Namdong River. A circle of skulls, one of which in the center is upside down and has the palate broken out of it. It seems to be a magical religious element of cannibalism, ritual cannibalism, either to protect oneself from the spirit of the person or to assume their powers. The fact that these go back 500,000 years means that Homo erectus, not Homo sapiens like ourselves, had the first religious thoughts. That particular ceremony is still practiced by certain tribes in Papua New Guinea. The Circle of Skulls shows that these skulls were deliberately placed in that order. They were placed around the skull that had been cannibalized, and they had not. It suggests a deliberation on the part of the being that put the skulls there. I don't think it was a table setting. It seems to be to fit more with something metaphysical, or something magical that the person was trying to do. Well, the concept of us as spiritual rather than physical beings, or at least physical beings that recognize that there is something more, is fundamental to any religious thought. Their survival was dependent upon the earth. Finding the right grains and roots, and for males being able to hunt the animals. It would be very easy to see eventually the land upon which they lived as a mother who gave life, because only females can give birth.
I started studying palm reading when I was about 11 or 12. Started reading kids' hands in junior high for lunch money. And subsequently studied astrology just to see if it worked, and indeed if you work with a personal chart it does work. Because of this, I would say, weird talent which really did not fit in with the Catholicism I was raised in. I was attracted to, I want to say, alternative belief systems. I always liked mythology, especially Greek mythology. And over the years I've studied mythological religious systems from all different countries. In 1975, there was a group that came out of the store called Sanctum Regnum on Milwaukee Street in Milwaukee, and it was called, what was it called? Temple of the Wiccan Reed. And I was elected one of the first elders there in the year 1975 and held that position of eldership for 2 years. Consequently, I did a lot of networking. I started my own group in 1977. In 1980, affiliated with Covenant of the Goddess nationwide. Covenant of the Goddess is a group from California. It started as a California group to be an umbrella organization for witches and pagans and covens and solitaries, and to give them some sort of, I want to say, cohesiveness and legitimacy. The Goddess still continues today. They do have a website. Now it's worldwide. After the time I spent being first officer of Covenant of the Goddess, I was first officer of Wisconsin COG Council. After that, I had a group for many years, I believe. Gosh, how long was that? Up until about, I'd want to say, I have to think here, just due to the nature of things, due to the nature of working a business, working a full-time job, having children to take care of, and also I'd want to say, personality conflicts. The group was discontinued in the 70s, early 80s, for a person to openly declare their religious affiliations or beliefs meant that you could be subject to harassment, and sometimes just from neighbors, sometimes from born-again Christian groups. And since I had children, to be open, use my real name, that sort of thing, it just was not, I felt that it could be a dangerous situation. I didn't want my children to be harassed for having their mother be a witch.
I do think part of my interest goes beyond this life and goes back into my ancestral heritage. Some of my ancestors I've been able to research and follow lines back into pagan Ireland and ancient Scotland and some other parts of the world. To strengthen my connection with those ancestors, I've gone to ancient ancestral places, and I've found, as I've connected with the spirit of place, with various ancestors in my heritage, that has also helped me deepen my understanding of the spiritual dimensions of nature, as well as the old religion, as some people call the craft. Circle Sanctuary, where we are now, this is Brigid Spring, which is a spring named after Brigid, the goddess of healing from ancient Celtic cultures. And this is a place where we come, we meditate, we put forth healing prayers, intentions, sometimes individually, sometimes in a group form. And as you look around, you'll see ribbons. And these ribbons, these hoops with the ribbons attached, have all been put here. Each ribbon represents a prayer, represents a wish for healing for oneself or for a loved one. The old custom of tying bits of cloth, string, ribbons at sacred springs and sacred wells goes back hundreds and some say thousands of years. Some say it's a Celtic custom, although you'll find across different traditions that sacred wells and holy springs have been part of many different pagan traditions. This particular one we connect with Brigid not only because of my own personal connection with her, and I had discovered this spring on a walk one day, but because Brigid is a multicultural as well as a multi-religious goddess. She not only is honored by people in a variety of different Wiccan traditions, but also across a variety of pagan traditions, Druidism, and some other forms of the Celtic religion. Brigid also is honored as a sacred facet of the divine by people of other religions as well. In fact, Christian mystics call her Saint Bridget or Saint Brigid or Breed or Bride sometimes. And certainly there's a long association between Christian honoring of the creative force of nature as Saint Bridget and the earlier pagan connection. Circle Sanctuary is a sacred nature preserve. It's 200 acres and it's located in the southwest part of Wisconsin, about 13 miles west of Mount Horeb. I came to find this land as a result of a dream. I saw the land in a dream during the time that we were questing for land and knew that it was available, that somehow it was on the market. The very next day I started looking for clues as to where this land might be. At that time we had an office in Mount Horeb, Wisconsin, and we had somebody working in our office from the local area on a part-time basis. I mentioned my dream to everybody who was in the office that day, and this woman said, "I know of a place that just came up for sale." So I called up the people who were selling it, which was one of the local banks, and expressed my interest. And then when I came out, I realized that indeed this was the land that I had seen in my dream. We had been looking throughout Wisconsin for a place that would be private yet accessible to people, not too far from an area where there'd be an airport or a bus station, something that would be in good condition and preferably organically farmed rather than something that would have had much chemical farming happening on it. A place that would have sacred sites that could be meditation places for the Circle Sanctuary community and other pagans. This land had all of those things. And we continue to find special places on the land as we take our walks and do our individual meditations. Circle Sanctuary Nature Preserve not only is a nature preserve for preserving habitat for wild creatures and various ecosystems, but it's also a nature preserve where humankind, science, spirituality, and the sacred dimensions of nature can come together in a harmonious way. What's wonderful about the spring is that we have sacred plants growing all around them. Plants that have had a long association with spirituality, spiritual work. This is Angelica, also known as the Archangel plant, for blessing homes and health. We have mint, wild mint, a kind of spearmint growing, connected with the inner life, with balance and say the word witch comes from wick, meaning to bend, to shape, just like making baskets out of the flexible willow branches. We use the spring for a variety of healing rituals, and one of the things that we do is actually sit down and gaze into the spring so that we tune into the beauty of the shapes of this system, ecosystem, and if you notice, there'll be bubbles here, actually looking into the bubbles, kind of like scrying. Put our hands in the water, anoint ourselves with the sacred water of the spring. For those that really feel a strong need for renovation, rejuvenation. We have them actually bathe their arms, their feet, anoint their heads, and to connect with the spring in that way. We also have people who will take some of the water home with them in a glass jar or in a little film container or some other vessel that they bring with them. But most of the time when people come and actually make physical contact with the spring, it's by gazing into it and anointing themselves with the water.
All throughout my childhood, I was extremely clairvoyant. I could see a lot. I can understand a lot. My dad is very spiritual too, and my mom believes that it's satanic. And so my dad would talk about seeing it in the Bible someplace. Me at 5 years old, I didn't speak. I never said my first word until I was around 5, 6, something like that. But my father would would basically ask out loud into the air in his own head, where does it say that in the Bible? I wish I knew, because I might show you. So I had to go grab the Bible, open it up to a page and go, here, read it. You know, I'd do it all in sign, hand it over, and he'd read it and then flip out. So would my mom, because I was illiterate, I was not speaking, but I'd hand a Bible over to somebody or hand a book with this passage in it and be able to prove the point right away. But the actual first contact, so to speak, would be when I was about 8, my father got shot in Ohio. For about 2 months beforehand, I saw that it was happening in my dreams. I knew exactly who was going to kill. My uncle Jeff got killed in it. My aunt got really well beat up. My dad got shot 5 times. And he had the dreams too that he had to go. He didn't know why, but he had to go. And I kept on telling him not to go because I kept on seeing demons in my dream. So later on he went and everything ended up happening, and that's when I really freaked out. At a very young age, I had very, very, very open doors. And basically because of the teachings of the church, I thought it was evil. So I don't really like to go to church now. We're Scottish, well, we're Celtic, we're Czechoslovakian Gypsy, and we're Native American. On my dad's side, it's just Celtic and Czechoslovakian Gypsy. On my mom's side, it's Native. I'm the one who actually ended up picking it up again. It basically died with my grandfather, and I picked it up again. Okay, my father, he's Mormon. And he always had, throughout his childhood and everything, he always had clairvoyancy too. He could see everything that was happening. Well, not everything, but he could see a lot of things that were happening before it happened. And he saw it in me, and he helped to nurture it and basically open my doors even wider. My mom, very close-minded. The Native American died with my grandfather, Pappy, because in the time of his life, Native American, if you were even the tiniest amount and you emit it, you were looked at as worse than black, and in that age, if you were black, you were treated poorly. But you were looked at worse than that if you were Native.
Was he part of the government school system for Native Americans?
No, he wasn't. My grandmother, his mother ended up marrying a white man, so they got kicked out of the tribe because she married a white man. So I'm trying to trace my roots back to get back into the res, but it's kind of hard with paperwork lost and names lost and all that. That was during the time of the great censuses and all that fun stuff of when they were starting to write out their bureaucratic even more. And when she married the white man, she got kicked out, which means that she does not exist. Her name does not exist anymore. It's not in the book. So I got to trace back even farther. As you know, Lakotas do not know how to write, or they didn't back then. All that they knew were symbols. So I'm probably never going to walk back into the res. So my mom, she was raised Catholic and Roman Catholic, and basically kept all of her doors shut. She has open doors. She can see any time that we have a new baby coming into the family, she predicts it. She knows.
For us, has she?
Yeah, no, we aren't pregnant right now.
People have told us that
that we got a little girl on the way.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain a little bit about how you ended up in that kind of physical state?
The death?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I don't remember a lot about it, as I was about 7 years old, and I had scarlet fever, which, of course, the delusions and the mindset, I remember virtually nothing about it. But I was told a great deal about what happened to me. According to my mother, my brother, and everyone there, and the doctor, Dr. Fall, who was administering treatment until I died, he had actually gone so far, Dr. Fall, as signing the death certificates and having everything officially put aside that I was dead. The sheet had been pulled over my face. He had pronounced me dead for more than 55 minutes when my grandmother arrived with a medicine bag saying, I'm going to go in there in the room with David and bring him back. And my mother, a devout Jehovah's Witness, said, you're not taking your pagan, heathen Injun ways in there with my son. And so grandmother was barred from entering the room. Her name was Maggie Running Fox Shopcall. And she said, no, Spirit's telling me that David's not really gone yet. So I'm not bringing him back to life. I'm just not letting him go all the way to death. The doctors told her, no, he's dead. He's been dead for a while. But she didn't listen. She somehow got in the room, and nobody knows how. We think she climbed in a window. She was about 80 then, and she climbed in a bedroom window, got in there with me somehow, put the medicine bag under my pillow and started chanting. They heard her chanting, they broke in the room, and by the time they broke in the room, I was already awake, sitting up in her arms. And everybody was shocked, the doctor especially. And he said, well, he's alive. He was over there taking my pulse and such, I'm told. But he said he'll be like a human vegetable. He won't be able to speak, and he probably won't be able to walk. But I started yakking. I opened my mouth and started telling a story right then and there, proving him wrong on that point. And they tell me, and I don't remember this, but they tell me that I said I was in a room filled with white light, typical of near-death experience, right? And that there is a man with me with a long white beard, much longer than what I have today. Perhaps, though, he did encourage this particular fashion. I don't know for sure. And he told me, he said, you can't go yet. You and I have work to do in this world. And that's it. Next thing you know, I'm alive. So grandmother, based upon this experience, decided this marked me and that I should become shaman. Or at least a soothsayer, fortune teller, if you will, although I personally am distasteful of the word fortune teller because, as grandmother said, no man can know the future. Just some of us is good at predicting it. So she didn't believe in fortune telling because that's saying the future is written in stone, but she did believe we can predict it based on the path we're walking now. She did it with the stones, Cherokee Spirit Stones, and she did in fact not only do a reading for me that very day, when I stumbled upon her working with the stones, she gave me a stone out of the batch. She said, pick a stone. Which are you drawn to? So I picked one. I later discovered that the stone I chose was a stone. I had chosen a stone that symbolized the totem that can come from the insect kingdom. An animal totem, you're familiar with totemism, the idea that an animal, bird, reptile, fish, whatever, could be a power animal, spirit animal that empowers you, guides you, helps you.
The first thing I ever remember that would be counted as supernatural or peculiar or anything is when I was like 4 or 5, going through the woods, and there's a spot where some people have blown it off as a sinkhole, but I don't know any sinkholes that are perfectly square. And I had a really bad feeling that it was like a grave site. And I was like no more than like 10 feet in that woods, but it took me 2 hours to get out, and I was literally running through that woods screaming, just terrified, and it took me a year to get back in the woods. And we lived in the woods, so I didn't go out of the house much.
What do you think you saw or felt?
It could have been just a warning, of, that it was sacred ground, or, kind of like that ominous presence that most people feel when they go into graveyards and that. And as far as I know, it's not historically recorded as being such. But I've got a real strong feeling from having lived there for 20-some, without having historical proof that there is something there. And the best thing I can define it is probably first contact. And the first thing, every time I've ever talked to anybody, their first contact has always got to be the scariest thing that ever occurred in their whole life. And because you don't expect it, you don't understand it, the only thing you want to do is get away to something that's normal.
First experience I ever had, I was down in the basement of McDonald's, and there was a spirit down there. Was not very happy. So, and I did this. When I was doing this, I flew completely on autopilot. I didn't know what was going. I didn't know exactly what I was doing. I went down, and I took a cigarette, shredded it up, and left a tobacco offering in the 4 directions. Okay. After that, I called up to basically find out what the hell did I just do. What I did was nothing more than just an offering, and that kind of...
It pretty much got the ball rolling.
It pretty much got the ball rolling, kind of started me down that path.
I'm 20 years old. I'm engaged. Right now we're living in Cudahy. I work in daycare, Lord help me, and I work with toddlers, which is incredibly challenging because they have the same needs as babies, but they're also older, so they can get into more stuff. I also own my own business with Mary Kay Cosmetics, just trying to pick up some extra money. I'm Christian, Episcopal denomination, and I've always grown up in the church. My dad is an ordained Episcopal priest. He doesn't currently work in a church setting. He's more along the lines of kind of a substitute teacher as far as priests go right now. I don't remember ever being told exactly what day of the week it was that I was born, but that next Sunday, and every Sunday since then, I've been in church.
So how did you get wrapped up with a shaman?
I started going to church in Racine when my family lived in Greendale, when I was about 14 years old. And one of the guys in my youth group, I became attracted to, and that happened to be his best friend. And so I started dating his best friend for about a year, and then he started playing with my head more and more, and to make a long story short, I ended it, and by that time we had become very good friends, and things just kind of progressed from there. He doesn't, how do I put this? He doesn't proclaim himself as a Christian, and sometimes That bothers me because I feel very strongly about my beliefs, but it definitely worries my parents. So intentionally or not, they put me on a lot of guilt trips about that, and, well, why aren't you guys going to church more? And I'm like, because we're tired Sunday mornings and we don't feel like driving half an hour down to church. And I think they're really worried that he's going to corrupt me.
Every time that you have a problem, I always answer it with some profound bit of wisdom. I know that annoys you.
Yeah, that really ticks me off because I'm like, no, I just want you to tell me what you think I should do next. Over the time since really I first met him, and then I've been learning more as our relationship progressed. His beliefs and my beliefs don't conflict all that much. It's not like I'm getting ready to marry someone that's satanic and I'm full out Christian and big conflict. It's actually very similar. I was never a big fan of the whole, what we call, at least in the Episcopal Church, the high church, which is tons of incense, and you have about 15,000 acolytes running around in this big procession. I was never a real big fan of that. I was more into the kind of things that we did at my church camp, which was, you sit outdoors and you sing some really good songs about Jesus, and you do the Eucharist, and that's pretty much the end of it. So when he came along, a lot of the ceremonies that you do, and it's more laid back and it's more in tune with nature, which I've always liked.
Ceremonies I don't do them this way because I don't really know too many people that are actually grown up enough, but most of the Native American ceremonies that, at least that I've seen, have been pretty much in your birthday suit, stuff like that. Not all of them, but a good share of them. So we're very much a people who is just kind of a whatever people, Yeah. Basically, if you're not hurting me, if you're not hurting the tribe, if you're not dishonoring yourself, then it's got to be okay.
I pretty much live by, code of chivalry. Code of chivalry and Bushido, which is you live and die by the blade. Honor above all. The chivalry code is basically speaking a word that is false. Be true to yourself and your beliefs, and defend women, help old ladies across the street. Bushido, honor Bushido is the same thing, but honor really comes into it. It's honor. One of the main beliefs of Bushido is death before dishonor. Okay, that's one of the main sayings. And back in feudal Japan, if they dishonor themselves, the only way that they could bring back some honor is to kill themselves. Okay, and I really live by that. I don't.
And we managed to keep him alive all this time.
Have you ever killed yourself?
I'm a 7th generation seer in my tribe, and certainly I never really thought about that when I was younger. I've always known that I'm a Mohegan Indian in the Mohegan tribe of Connecticut, and everyone always knew that Aunt Hattie used to read tea leaves, never for men, because they would poo-poo it, but she always read tea leaves for women. And if Aunt Hattie said it, it happened. So everyone was sort of aware of that in the family. And then there was a perception as our tribe moved towards federal recognition. We actually had federal recognition, let it lapse, and then try again. That we could trace psychic ability back at least 7 generations. I really didn't sort of like put it all together until I was about 14, when I really started reading tarot cards and started studying traditional scrying or divination forms. I liked tarot. I thought this was really cool, but my sort of scientific brain kicked in and goes, well, where did this come from? Who invented this? In spite of my father's poo-pooing all of this, you know, saying, oh, this is just all nonsense, I had my mother, who's the Indian side, sort of always encouraging us to use our psychic ability. And certainly the idea that, it happened several times, a relative on my mother's side would die, and if that happened at night, they'd come to say goodbye. And the next day, Mother would get the call from the other relative saying, oh yes, Grandma Durfee died. Well, my mother knew that last night. But I don't think I really got what I considered formal training until I was about 16, 17, and maybe even 18, from a wonderful woman in Crown Point, Indiana, who's now dead. Her name is Mary Ann Gallivan. She was a spiritualist, a member of a spiritualist church, and we had what we called prayer meetings, and we would just gather at her home, usually on a Friday evening, not just to do prayers, but actually to do seances, the whole lifting of the table and the rapping noises and channeling and all that sort of, the sort of great hocus pocus. That's why you do seances. Let's see if we can get some spooks kind of attitude that you get from a lot of teenagers these days. It's not so strange that the Ouija board is still popular, but here kids get together and they get a Ouija board and I'll say, let's see if we can get some scary spooks, and well, they get scary spooks, instead of, let's see if we can find a spiritualist teacher who can come in, a spirit teacher or spirit guide to come in here and teach us. They rarely ask that question. Most people's earlier dealings with psychic ability or psychic phenomena has been just to frighten them away from it. My experience, again, was quite different. I remember at 7 saying to the nun in Sunday school, wasn't it the yellow color that was all around the priest at the sermon this morning? Wasn't that just beautiful? And this woman looks at me like, well, and then I go, oh, this is not the kind of person I should be talking to about this stuff. So I just went over and talked to my mother about it. Again, it's not just my Native American background. A lot of people get, oh, if you've got Native American blood, you must be psychic, or some other strange thing. I think it's just I'm sort of a typical American, but I just happen to have some Native American blood, which has sort of helped. I've been in the Chicago area since the early 80s, and before that, Northwest Indiana, which is practically the southeast side of Chicago. Lake County, North Lake County, Indiana is more like Chicago than it is like Indiana. About 7-8 years ago, I made a commitment that someone asked me, what's your bottom line? What do you want to do? And I said, I want to read and I want to teach. So I want to read, divine, to be a reader for people, and I also want to teach. And so that's what I've been doing. And I quit all my silly other 9-to-5ers to do this full time. I'm certainly not getting rich doing this, but it's a commitment to helping other people. I find that a lot of those who are into magic as a form of prayer, that's what I call magic, by the way, is prayer in action. It's not, oh God, please help me find my keys. It's about conversation with the divine, and that conversation happens through word, thought, and gesture, and those three are absolutely necessary for you to have a magical technique. But I found that most people in Chicago are soul practitioners. It's very difficult to get together a group of people without it sort of turning into a kind of pagan place. You have when people get together and they do their little rituals, then they start having their little sexual encounters, and before you know it, this person or that person's jealous or whatever, and it all breaks up, and that's happened a lot from my observations. And I just wasn't interested in all that.
Is there such a thing as an average witch? Based on my test sample, she, and it would be a she, is probably in her mid-30s, divorced, raising a child on her own, works a middle management position for between $16,000 and $28,000, and is a convert from Christianity.
My mother went to the state of Washington once to see about a grandchild who was being given away for adoption. I did not want her to get on that plane. I was very worried about it. I had a flash of something being wrong with the engines and the plane crashing. Well, my worst fears were allayed. There was trouble with the engines and they had to land early. But that was like the first instance of psychic ability.
We've started up on a new schedule. On our moons, on the new moons, every other new moon, we've been working on pagan parenting. And there are certain others that we've invited to join that group. And they come just for our pagan parenting sit-down meetings. On our holidays, I think the major goal is not to do high magic or any big workings, but basically to have fun, to celebrate. That's what we're there to do, is to celebrate a holiday. On our full moons, we're going to be working on different magical techniques, every single one. That'll be like over the next year. We basically get together, cast our circle, and create our sacred space, and work on whatever personal issues that the Covenant's dealing with.
I myself originally studied the Native American past. I am Native American. I served about a 7-year apprentice learning Native American practices. And a few years after I'd been in Milwaukee, I met Megan and Gillian and the others, and in order to honor the other part of my heritage and to increase my knowledge, we started the Covenant. I'll try and do some of the bridge building so that the Native Americans understand where the Earth spiritualists are coming from, and the Earth spiritualists understand where the Native Americans are coming from. Because especially the Native Americans have had so much bad luck with anthropologists and other people coming in that have taken religion or taken artifacts, etc. They're very leery about anybody coming in. And so part of what I've been doing is trying to teach the people who are truly interested how to approach Native Americans, giving them a good sound basis so that they have some idea of what they're talking about when they approach a Native American, and basically giving people an idea of what it's really about, as opposed to some of the literature that's out there that is completely and totally erroneous. Also, I've done work with going into Native American communities, explaining what the Earth religious people, the pagans, are about, what the connections are, showing them, because they know that I'm a pipe carrier and I have the credentials to speak to them. They will listen when I come in and say, okay, this group of people wants to learn this, this is why, this is what they're about. So in that way I can try to foster trust on both sides and understanding on both sides. It's the trust factors and getting people to understand that not every white person that comes in is coming in to steal something. Some people honestly do want to learn and do respect it. And that's a real big thing, especially for a lot of our older people.
Born and raised Jehovah's Witness. Around the age of 12 or so, I began reading alternative literature to the literature I was fed through my young developing years. Became involved with a group in Chicago that has no proper affiliation or name when I was about 17. And subsequently moved about here and there, connected with my cousin Kevin, more interested in trying to meld and marry all possible concepts across the board, because there were so many relationary aspects in all religion around the world, regardless of affiliation, that really everyone believes the same thing. It's like a Sufi quote I read once about a mirror. Truth being a great mirror, it's been shattered into 1,000 pieces. And each and every person who looks into that piece says, look, I have the truth right here. And, well, they're all right.
And at the same time, they're all wrong because it's all perspective.
Born and raised Southern Baptist. The conversion was interesting. It didn't happen right away. It was something that I had to think about for a long time. Well, I realized that it wasn't working out for me. When I was about, this is 16, but around 19, a friend of mine named Ryan, I was going to school up at Lakeland. He was in Chicago. He was involved in the outskirts of the pagan community down there. He introduced these people down there. It was interesting, fascinating. I wanted to learn more about it. One summer, he calls me up. We go over to a friend's house, and this is where I meet Fred. And actually, I think you were there, but no, you weren't there. Maurer Tutal was there,
yeah.
And that was Stormhaven, which I later found out in this group is a legend. And even after being initially introduced to everyone, it took a while. The real birth didn't happen until 1995 at the Sundance. That was it right there. I think that was what kind of drew the, this is the mark, here it is. The only thing that really happened to me was witnessing a devotion to a belief, being asked to participate, feeling the energy, really feeling something that wasn't, I don't know how to explain it. And honestly, the man to talk to about what happened there is him, as he was the one that did the Sundance. I guess it started me on a different road, because that touched off a series of rituals that summer that led up to, I believe, Lamas, which was the last one that I went to that year. And then I moved out to LA for a couple months and realized how much I missed everybody and had to come back.
I'm also a convert, born and raised Catholic, and that was fine by me for years and years and years. And what I was the most drawn to with the Catholic faith was the works of mercy that every Catholic is supposed to ascribe to, and very few do and could probably even list them. And I was fortunate enough to meet a group called the Catholic Worker that really lived these works of mercy, doing things for homeless people, getting involved in the political system. The big one in the early 80s was the disarmament movement. I was very involved in that. And that gave me my lifelong taste, I guess, for community. And since then, I can't stand living with, less than 8 people. When I came back to Milwaukee in '85, the first thing I did was look for the Catholic Worker community here, because I was real comfortable living and working in that setting. And lo and behold, it was full of pagans. And we all lived in this big house that served as a shelter, still serves as a shelter for homeless families. And they were pagan, and we'd have long conversations, and I met other pagans. And it wasn't a long, drawn-out thing for me. It was like, yeah, this makes sense. It just felt better because I was fortunate the pagans I met were all very committed to whatever aspect of social change, was their priority. They really worked on it, whereas too many of the Catholics I met were, kind of just talked a good talk and didn't do anything. So it was through the people I met at the Catholic Worker House that I met Kevin, and then we got married. So I sort of married into this coven, but even then, not right off the bat. I would probably have only called myself a pagan about barely a year before a little over a year before we got married. And one of the things we did before we got married was check out if Milwaukee had a cups group. Sure enough, there was a group in town just forming, and we called the woman that was interested in forming this group, and it turned out Kevin had known her ages ago, I think, from his college days. And the next thing I know, this neophyte pagan that I was, I'm running a cups group. I'm writing rituals.
Back then you were still calling yourself a neo-Christian.
A radical Christian, neo-pagan with overtones of Native American spirituality. That's totally described it. It's quite a mouthful, and I don't know if it would fit on any form I had to fill out that asked my religious affiliation. We were all real involved with the Cups group, on and off and on and off and on and off. But it was probably and we'd always had a dream, Kevin and I, of having community. Because we met in community. He lived in the Catholic worker house too for a while. When we got married and got our own place, it was a revolving door. There was people always staying with us. But it was really, I think, in '95 when Kevin did a Sundance here with just our group. It was a very pagan Sundance. I don't suppose too many traditional Native American elders would even, I don't know, they might not think it counted, but it was very different. But that really seemed to bond us.
It really was. It was an amalgam.
Yeah.
It was the blending point of the two different sides, really, I think. Because what it was is I needed to dance, and I wasn't comfortable because of some of the things I had heard were going on out west. But I knew I needed to dance. So basically what I did was I talked to my grandmother. She thought it was a fine idea to do it privately and everything. And I set it up. And since I didn't have enough people that really knew the Sundance rituals and everything, I scripted it cross-culturally between Native American and pagan to cover all the elements that needed to be covered. So a lot of the invocations and stuff were much more pagan than Native American, but really the heart of the ritual was Native American.
Yeah. But that really was the point where our group of loosely affiliated, well-meaning pagans, we really just gelled there. Yeah. And that's I think really where the community was born. And so since then, pretty much everything that we do, in the outside world is to make it possible for us all to live together, and create our own little world here in the two houses.
Now explain the two-house concept.
Well,
ran out of room.
Yep.
Couldn't move any more pagans in.
Yeah, one duplex just wasn't enough for the number of people that seemed to be needing a place to stay or that we wanted to stay here. So we started looking around for another house, and we got real lucky. On the very next block was a duplex that the former owners had converted into 4 apartments, and we were able to pick it up.
Well, I grew up a Christian Scientist, which uses magic of their own. They don't call it that, but it is magic. So I was sort of used to the magic using part of religion. Got into the other part, the earth and psychic and energy manipulating part, slowly through reading about Edgar Casey, for instance, and then it all gelled into Wicca when I got together with Gillian, who we've mentioned before. Gelled for me then is this is the next logical step for me, and ever since then it's been home. I was old enough at that time, however, that I didn't have any problems with family because my mother was already dead. My father was, he was living in Illinois, and he didn't live a whole lot longer after that. My children, I did raise 2 pagan kids. My son is, as a matter of fact, the pagan chaplain in a prison here in Wisconsin. My daughter is a solitary practitioner. She's not, at this time at least, practicing strongly, but it's still part of her life. Part of my son's life a great deal, but part of her life just a little. That's about it for the family. But I'm very proud of having raised 2 very, very good pagan children.
I performed my first exorcism when I was 17, because just after my 17th birthday, I was like really into conjuring demons, and I had this one little book called The Do-It-Yourself Guide to Witchcraft, which had nothing to do with witchcraft. It was just a bullshit little book. But it had a little formula for calling up the demon at the threshold of pain. And a friend of mine who was like really into the dramatic arts, an actor, was 17 at the time. And he read one of the conjurations, isn't that great fun? And from that moment on, the disturbances in that house were tremendous, including, bangs in the night, and Actually, a waterfall started in this person's living room, just above where Drew read the Conjuration. Mind you, this was a new addition, brand new addition. There were no pipes to bring water there. Hadn't rained for days, and yet here's water, drip, drip, dripping. And the roof had been replaced twice, and still it continued to drip. But just before my 18th birthday, it was requested by this Mary Ann Gallivan, my what I consider one of my first teachers, very politely demanded that I do the exorcism. So yeah, did the exorcism, and they didn't have any problems after that. Sort of got involved both as my own interest and as my own stumbling around, as teenagers will do, and trying to fix things that are gone awry. And then saying, well, that's a good way to do things, and that's not a good way to do things, and sort of start knowing the difference, and that's a good thing. Box and complain whenever I go to a place like the occult bookstores and teenagers are buying, like Levy's book of the Satanic Rituals, the Satanic Bible, or the Necronomicon, the book for calling up the gods of chaos. And that gets me all upset, but you know, hey, when I was 17, I wanted to read those books, so I sort of understand. But I'm just sort of wondering if these people are lucky enough to have a teacher like I had, like Mary Ann Gallivan, who sort of showed me that sure, we could do this stuff, but isn't it better to do it this way?
When I was 17, I moved out of my parents' house. I ended up moving in with this coven, and they were a group of 4 solitary Wiccans. And then I decided to take the lot of Wicca, and I ended up taking it towards the black end of everything. Really stupid move, but I found that I was learning a lot and able to do a lot quicker that way than just naturally waiting for my doors to open. Every pagan goes through a time that we call burning times. And that's a very, very hard time in your life if you're white, if you do white magic, or if you do more good alignment things. That's a hard time of your life if you're just doing that. If you're doing black, I guarantee you, you will be arrested 1,000,000 times. You'll usually end up having a lot of vices, being addicted to a lot of drugs. I did. And that's because drugs inside of it makes everything happen a lot quicker. You don't have to meditate to get there because you're already in that frame of mind. So it's a lot more of a weaker art to follow than white. After I left that, about the age of 19, I decided to go shaman. And just recently I've been ordained as a heyoka, which is a laughing man. He does everything backwards from what he's supposed to. He makes everybody laugh in really hard times, takes away stress, and in times of happiness, he puts them all on guard by making them cry and doing things that are very depressing and harmful to himself sometimes, just to teach the lessons.
Yeah.
So
which makes
that's what I do.
Very fun to live with.
Yeah, yeah. I always told you marrying a shaman would be a hard road.
Yeah.
Free Spirit Crystals was started in 1991 after I had a softball accident in which I injured my shoulder. And I went through a year of allopathic medicine trying to heal my shoulder, eventually having an operation, and the shoulder did not heal. And I did not know anything about healing at the time, alternative healing. I thought Western medicine could fix just about anything. And then it was quite a shock to me to realize that they did not. So a friend of mine suggested that I go see somebody who worked with crystals and did Reiki. And I thought that was pretty weird because I had no prior knowledge of crystals or alternative healing. I wasn't very spiritual. Didn't really have too much of a concept of God or my own spiritual nature. But when she pointed out that I really didn't have too many alternatives left, I went to see this wonderful woman who worked with me, and in 2 months my shoulder was fine and I was lifting things over my head. So I kind of got curious about the whole thing, and I started to receive telepathic messages from somewhere, I don't know where, but these messages started to tell me about my life and where it was headed, where I was supposed to go with it, and how I could change it. And it was very intriguing to me. I didn't exactly know what to think of it, but it was interesting, and so I listened. And one night I was lying in bed, and this voice came to me and said, "It's time to start your crystal business." And I thought it was completely crazy, because I had no knowledge of crystals. I didn't know anything about alternative healing. I really didn't have any reason to want to do this. So I started arguing with this voice in my head, and every argument that I had, there would be a better answer. And so I just said, well, what the heck? What have I got to do? I'll do it. So I started Free Spirit Crystals out of my house back in 1991. And it evolved from there to where it is today.
Have you always been in Chicago?
Born and raised here. I'm pretty urbanized.
Okay.
I'm pretty urbanized. I've gone now, this year I've gone to more festivals this year. Mm-hmm. I've gone to 5 festivals this year than I had entirety of my life. Prior to that, I had just gone to PSG once. And one of the things is that we see a lot of nationalism across the country. You don't see it here in Chicago. It's still very provincial. You don't see a lot of national groups here. We don't have a lot of national officers, because Chicago is a very different type of community. We have a really strong community. We have about 30 groups out that are practicing publicly. We have a lot of teaching groups that are starting and establishing. But unlike a lot of other the country, especially like California, I know that they can get a project going, and then they get it going for like a year or two, and then they can give it up, and the community doesn't fall apart. Here, nobody wants to get involved with the project that doesn't have length of time, long periods of time. They don't want to get involved with things that are just going to be over with next week. Our covens, we have covens here. We have one of the oldest covens in that First Temple of the Craft by Stan Modrick. It was one of the first legal temples registered in Illinois and in the United States. It's still here today, 25 years later. We have influenced the rest of the country. Lots of our people have gone out. But here, we're very insular. It's very, at times, we have a lot of debate. If you know anything about Chicago, it's a bunch of small towns rammed up against each other. And people tend to think of Chicago as this one holistic thing. But Chicago has like 5 different distinct pagan communities. And they include the Gardnerian community, we have an eclectic community, we have a great Santeria Voodoo community. We have then North Side Pagans, we have South Side Pagans, and West Side Pagans. And we do get together. The next great celebration for us is Goddess Day March on October 9th up here on the North Side. And probably one of the events that's probably causing the most stir is Merry Meet Blessed Be in DC is the main organization. And we're going to have a mirror event, which is probably one of the first of the political protests that are emerging on October 29th and 30th. And we're getting wide-scale cooperation. If Chicago is about anything right now, it's about finding ways to cooperate. Not just locally, but with the rest of the country as well.
My first year at the Bristol Renaissance Fair here, I was approached after hours to take part in a full moon circle. And we got out to the clearing where we were holding it late in the evening, and 30 people, ranging in age from probably 14 to 70, looked at me, who was at the time about 25, and said, "So what are we doing?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And they said, "Well, you're the high priestess, aren't you?" And I said, "I guess so." And pretty much from that moment on, I've been leading groups in ritual and have been looked up to as a quote-unquote high priestess, because it seemed that the people I was around didn't know as much as I did academically, or they didn't have the experience that I did, where I thought my experience was nothing because I just experimented a lot on my own. I'd done everything alone up until that point. I mean, there was definitely a lot of energy raised in that circle, and I definitely felt that I was the person in charge, that I was the person who was channeling this energy and focusing it into what we were trying to do, which was mostly just benevolent things for the group and for the fair. There are quite a few pagans in the Chicago area. There's a group on the south side that is extremely organized and extremely just well put together in general, has strong leadership and a lot of good people volunteering for it. On the north side where I am, groups seem to come and go quite a bit. People are more independent and less likely to join things. I haven't seen a group sustain itself on the north side of Chicago yet.
Are most of your friends sort of into the same kind of thing that you are, or?
Very much so. I seem to live in my own little world sometimes and forget that the dominant paradigm is actually Judeo-Christian, because most people I know are not. In actual practice, I was trained in transcendental meditation when I was 13. And so for me, that has led into the practice of paganism. And it's kind of a back and forth flow for me. The meditation led into the ritual work, which leads me back into the meditation. My beliefs are reaffirmed constantly. My beliefs are reaffirmed every time I look at a tree. I think that's when I became a quote-unquote high priestess, is when I started to be constantly aware of my connection with the earth and my connection with other people, when I stopped seeing things as separate from myself, when I started seeing everything as a complete whole.
I don't really believe in covering it up and having to be in the closet about it, because our Constitution does give us freedom of religion, and so I like to exercise that right. I have gone to rituals at Circle Sanctuary that have been picketed by fundamentalist idiots, but luckily the police were on our side, and we do have our civil rights to worship as we please. So I'm going to exercise that right. The people that I work with, I've never really told them outright that I'm a pagan, but they've kind of slowly begun to suspect it over the years by looking at what I do, and they're okay with it. And you know, and if anybody were to discriminate against me because of it, I would certainly call them on it. So I don't really believe in hiding in the closet, because I think that just panders, you know, that gives them more power to keep us in hiding and in fear. That empowers, you know, the people that don't understand.
There were so many people who turned down the opportunity to present themselves on camera that it became an issue in and of itself. Generally speaking, the older you were, the more settled you were, the more you had a good mainstream white-collar type job, the less likely you were to come out of the broom closet, as pagans say, and admit who you were. In other words, if you were young and worked at McDonald's, you had nothing to lose. I was able to find one such closet type who was willing to explain why she led a closeted existence, and this is how she wanted to present herself.
I'm what's called in the broom closet. It's a phrase we borrowed from the gays who are in the closet to denote people who are into pagan or witchcraft type religions, but don't feel comfortable letting the public know what they are. Traditionally, many of us, if we are asked about our religious beliefs, will oftentimes say that they are the things that our parents raised us at, or will just say we haven't really got any, that we're agnostics. And the reason that we do this is many of us live in neighborhoods or have jobs where if we really outed ourselves, we really could either physically or financially or both endanger ourselves. This outfit that I am wearing has become kind of a laughable shorthand for a witch, and when no one can think of anything else for Halloween, they get a hat, something like this, and a black dress, and gee, I'm a witch. Unfortunately, it's sad that it has become such a laughable stereotype, because it truly is very symbolic gear that is the same as a bishop's robe. The hat that I have on is made up of two pieces primarily. There is a flat circle and there is a cone. The circle represents the sacred space when we cast a circle for where we do our prayers, as it were, in our form, and we try to raise energy. The cone portion, when we are in our sacred circle, we raise energy and focus and meditate, and the raising of this energy is a cone of energy. And so this really represents, in a sense, a physical denotation of our church. Black has been traditionally mystically seen as an absence of color, and like a black hole, it will suck in energy. So therefore, when you are trying to pray, cast a spell, or meditate, the black is such that you're starting with a clean palette and are trying to bring to yourself the positive energies. I'm 46, and this is 1999, and like many women of my era who were raised on the south side of Milwaukee, we were raised to be Catholic and subservient. Luckily, my father wasn't really like that, and so even though the good sisters at my Catholic schools did try to teach me my place, he taught me to think. Unfortunately, I got branded kind of a rebel, and when I would ask the hard questions, I was supposedly influenced by the devil. I was supposedly not having a strong faith. One of the favorite phrases of my Catholic school instructors when it came to religion was, take it on faith. You're too young to understand this. And that was just kind of a cop-out. Then in high school, I had a comparative religion studies, and the concept of paganism, Wiccan, shamanism was not at all addressed. We were taught about Islam, Judaism, Taoism, Buddhism, and of course the whole Catholicism Christian thing. And we were taught that witchcraft was a subset of perverted Christians who gave up God for the devil. And I was doing a paper on the history of witchcraft, trying to find out about these deviant souls and how they got lost. And unfortunately, it backfired, and I found out that the tradition of the bread and wine being made into the body and blood of Christ actually came from the cakes and ales in Wiccan traditions, that many of our holidays actually had their basis in many of the foods, and the way we celebrated things were actually very pagan. And when I tried to write some of this up, it was explained to me that this man was wicked and was trying to lead people astray by not really presenting things correctly. Then I got to college and learned more about this kind of stuff and found out that the manuscripts that were around and a lot of the serious historians, that a lot of what I had read in high school that was supposedly this guy trying to convert me to the devil truly was a lie on the part of my teachers. And initially I wasn't a practicing witch, as it were, because almost everybody that I met that was into witchcraft was doing it with drugs and sex, and a lot of them were really mixed up, and I met a lot of very power-hungry people who wanted to be witches so that they could have an incredible base of power and not have to use their talent and to use it for revenge. It's only in the last several years that I've been able to meet people who use it for what it is.
I'm a teacher, and this summer I taught in the Sacred Heart School of Theology. So I was teaching a group of Catholic priests. And I took as one of my readings a reading from Joseph Campbell's book, The Power of Myth, about the myth of the Garden of Eden, and how it's actually a very old Sumerian myth that has been twisted around to blame the woman for sin. And we had a very interesting discussion about that. Certainly Joseph Campbell has enlightened many people to the transformation of myth through time, that these are universal themes like the dead and risen God did not originate with Christianity, and the myth of the flood, and other things like that.
So I've studied Zen, Chan, Taoism, but I also studied Hindu religion, a few of those religions that we consider Eastern religions. I went through a phase of that for actually quite a few years before I was kind of, as you say, turned on to Kabbalah, Jewish or Hebraic mysticism. And I joined an order called the Order of the White Phoenix, and read about Crowley and about the Freemasons, and about the kind of magic that's actually a part of the foundation of this very government that we live under here. Most people aren't aware just how much occultism was a part of our founding fathers' beliefs and practices. This environmentalist thing, that's not regular precept of Christianity or Kabbalah necessarily. And so I felt there was something missing as I was into the Kabbalism, and I felt that I wanted to be more wild, more nature, more earth again, return to my grandmother's roots, return more to the shamanism. So I found Wicca. And Wicca, quite a bit more shamanistic than Kabbalah. And the Kabbalah is so much more book learning, so much more sophisticated, pseudo-scientific, more male. And Wicca, much more feminine, much more simple, much more earth, much more direct, and less intermediaries, fewer go-betweens between you and the source. I preferred it over what I've been doing with Kabbalah. Also, I was missing the goddess element. While I was in Kabbalah, they kept talking about God this, God that. And although I saw in the Tree of Life goddesses, in fact, when I studied Kabbalah on my own and interpreted it by my own means, I saw just as much goddess as I saw God there. But it seemed like the men who were teaching me at the time decided I was wrong. It's all God stuff, you know. But I found the opposite with Wicca. For a long time, most of the covens I encountered, it was all goddess, goddess, goddess. In fact, God's just a lesser god. The god, or Kerninos, Horn Lord, whatever you want to call him, is the consort of the goddess, not her equal. But then I started encountering the kind of Wicca, I'll call it Scott Cunningham style Wicca, in which the god and goddess are treated as equals, as a ladder of abstraction we need to actually climb over and get beyond, and get to the point that actually the source of the universe, or the source of us, the supreme deity, if you will, the goddess god of all things, is most likely nothing human at all. No gender, no beginning, no end, formless in all ways. In fact, we go back to Taoism here, Lao Tzu, who wrote most of what we read or follow to become Taoist, Lao Tzu said, the Tao that can be told of is not the ineffable Tao. In other words, if you can describe it, if you can tell what it is, it can't be the Tao. Because the Tao is a mystery. It can't be described. It cannot be fathomed by our pitiful little human brains. And that's what my grandmother spoke of when she talked about the Great Spirit. She said Great Spirit isn't like what she really did not like the Choctaw. And I gathered she didn't care too much for the Sioux either, as far as the Native Americans go. And she would put them down saying how they think Great Spirit's a man, when really Great Spirit's no man or woman. I tend to share her belief, personally, that the Great Spirit of the universe is boundless and infinite. And is also non-localized either, so it doesn't just belong to Earth or one planet or one point in the universe. It's everywhere. Now I'm eclectic. I am all of the above. You can call me an Irish Cherokee shaman or a Celtic Salagi Druid. Salagi, by the way, is the proper Cherokee pronunciation of the word Cherokee. You might say I'm a Shaolin Druid. I don't care. I don't care what you call me. I don't feel that I need to define myself, because you see, the need to define God is what's killing God. The need to define religion more is what causes the wars and the problems. It's the jihads, the holy wars, start because somebody defined their religion. They defined God and decided somebody else's definition is incorrect. And so I feel that defining ourselves is just as bad as defining our deities. If I say I am a witch, I am a druid, I am a shaman, I've defined myself. If I've defined myself, I've limited myself. I've put a fence around me and said, I'm this, not that. So I prefer to remain more undefined. Personally, I'll use the term druid for what I am one day and witch the next. I might one day just say I am a man, be quite Chen King, you know.
I'm raising my son Adrian. He's 11 years old. I'm a single mother. We haven't had a lot of problems with the fact that we're pagans. We're very open about it. The people in my neighborhood know about it. My family knows about it. His father's side of the family, who are Mormons, know about it, and they respect it. The only problem that I've had is in the way they celebrate Halloween in the schools. It seems like they've taken all the fun out of it. On the one hand, they took the brutality and the monsterization out of it. No evil witches, no ugly monsters. But on the other hand, they've denied it too, because they call it the harvest holiday now. And we know that the harvest holiday would have been celebrated a month and a half earlier. My son is very open with his family and with his friends about paganism. He has a pentacle that he wears occasionally, and he's not afraid to tell you what he believes. And he's very certain that when he grows up, he will make the choice for himself, whether it's to be a Christian, a pagan, a Mormon, or what have you. And I'm happy with that. I want him to make his own decisions. I don't think that they give enough room for individuality in schools. Sometimes it seems like they want children to be robots and just behave. Well, my son has the hyperactivity attention deficit disorder. That doesn't work with him. It's hard for me to get them to understand why my child seems to be so much more adult. I mean, I actually had the principal at school tell me that my child thought he was an adult and that he wasn't afraid of anything, and she had never encountered a child like that before. My child's very loving, very open, very good-natured. He's a first-degree black belt in Taekwondo, and yet he's completely nonviolent.
It's really challenging because you can tell your kids things, but then you have to take into consideration what the effect will be. For instance, when my daughter Bridget went to nursery school and people would sneeze, instead of saying, bless you, she'd say, blessed be you. So it's a matter of having, I want to say, the ability to handle them, but also the discretion as well. But the hardest thing, I think, was because their belief system didn't fit into the norm. It's made it very difficult for them at school. For instance, I remember one time when my daughter was in middle school, my oldest daughter, and they were doing some kind of Christmas thing, Madrigal Christmas thing. And she didn't know the Christmas carols because, of course, we weren't Christian. And she had a hard time with that, and I spoke to the music teacher, and it's kind of like, well, what do you say? When he says, well, what kind of religion are you? Sometimes working with Unitarianism helps. Sometimes, because Unitarian Universalists do have their own version of Sunday school in which kids are exposed to a lot of different belief systems, this may be the way to go for a lot of people. I think it's important that a parent teach them, one thing I did was teach them about nature, growing plants, how to identify them. From the time they were little kids, we'd go out and garden, and the kids would put the seeds in the earth, and they'd pat the ground and say, "Go, grow good, little seed." So it's a matter of, I want to say, treading a very fine line with that, which, given the public school system, can be a very difficult thing.
I have two children. My son is 6 and my daughter is 13, and I'm a single mom, and I'm also disabled. And I could not live on my own in my own space if I didn't have people around to help me. And Kevin and Julie have recently adopted a little boy, and so we take turns, shifts watching children and taking care of the parenting issues, which is very convenient because you don't have to hire outside help, and that your children are being raised literally in an enormous community. Our children are raised by all of us. My sister is expecting a baby, and we are having a baby. All of us are having this child, and that's kind of what our view on raising the children is, which is why our coven is doing the pagan parenting as well, discussion groups. That's one of our goals now, is raising pagan children.
What do you cover in your pagan parenting sessions?
Just about everything.
Yeah, there's a lot of books that have really interesting ideas on, rituals to do with your kids, or, here's a recipe to make soul cakes, or here's an art project, here's stories, here's songs, and they're very nice, very good stuff out there. And, we talk about those kind of things. But what we really want to get to is, how do we really pass on our values to the kids? I was raised Catholic. I went to a Catholic grade school. My parents didn't have to do a whole lot instilling, the values, those Christian values. They just sort of came from the environment, and I turned out pretty darn good. But some of our values don't really jive with mainstream American values. And the kids are bombarded with everything on TV, from how to be greedy with some of these candy commercials that drive me nuts, and how to expect everything. It's got to have a brand name, and not caring about other people, not caring about the planet. First thing we really felt we needed to do was really identify what our values are. There is no set dogma in paganism. Everyone sort of has some general things that they believe in common. So we want to really identify for ourselves our values, and then look at how do we teach those to our children using some of the child psychologists' models of children learning differently at different ages in their life. So the hope is eventually to write a book, which was our friend Bruce's idea, to have this as a book. And we want it to be broad enough so that anyone, even if they don't share our exact values, can use it to identify their own values, and then look at where their children are in ages and in life experiences, and apply some of the things that we hope to come up with, to instill those values in their children. So it's definitely not a one true way, this is how you should raise your children, but hopefully it'll have some ideas and some suggestions on things to do with your kids, ways to approach talking about the different things that people believe in, so that the kids are comfortable with it. As in almost any religion, there's people that are pretty much pagan on the high holidays, just like my dad's kind of Catholic just on Sunday. So another big thing that we think is important is, how does this go through your everyday life? It's not just a matter of going to a ritual 8 times a year and banging on the drum and dancing around the fire. What does being a pagan mean in everyday life? So Megan's written a really beautiful prayer that the boys say before they go to bed at night.
Melissa wrote that.
Melissa wrote that. And we do a real special blessing at mealtime, and we're going to start working with the boys on some actual energy work. We've done a little bit with that, and just get them used to, this is what we do on a day-to-day basis. It's not just presents and fun at Yule. It's an everyday thing.
It's my daughter. She's 13 already. And she's going into the real world, and she is, hitting straight up with people. Saying, oh, if you have sex, you're a slut. And, we've gone through these deep issues. That we haven't really dealt with too much with the younger children, and at times it's been kind of hard for her. But we've raised Amanda in a community for most of her life, and she's a very self-confident, a very secure person. She, isn't running around, saying, oh, I'm a witch, or, like these kids who first find out about Wicca when they're in high school and just get totally into it. It's just been part of her entire existence. We've tried to teach her that, to be who you are. We tried to teach her the values that we're living with, and sometimes it does, conflict quite a bit with the modern world. But we're very lucky that we have a huge community that supports her. Most of the adults that Amanda runs into in her everyday life are pagan. Her grandmother is pagan, her aunt is pagan, and everyone that she lives with here. So whenever there's a problem to deal with that, she doesn't want to come to her mom to talk about, it's a little too touchy to discuss with mom, she's got Julie over here, she can talk to her. If it's a male issue, she's got, Calvin there, Lewis, or Dan. So it's actually worked out really well. Amanda has lots of support, and she's just growing beautifully. She's a wonderful little girl.
Recently there's been an issue that has come up in Kansas where they've kind of decided that evolution does not necessarily have to be taught in schools because it's just a theory and so on. Do you have a sort of parental overview of all the textbooks that the kids bring home, and and how do you deal with some of the stuff that they're faced with in public? I assume they're going to a public school.
She's going to a public school. Thus far, actually, Amanda's been taught evolution in school, so that hasn't been too much of a problem. I guess the only problems that the big things that we've had to face is like society's view on sexuality, drug use, drinking, all those kind of things. She's had problems with the way she looks, personal appearance, dyeing her hair different colors, or the body piercing. Those things are, I've had clashes with her teacher over things like that. Not so much the evolution or issues that she's taught in school. So far, I've been, it's been pretty well jived with what we're believing and what we're teaching. So the problems that we've had have been social issues. People's personal opinions on what is right and what is wrong. I believe that Amanda's going to school to learn. I don't think that her teacher, needs to be focusing on, Amanda's hair is pink today, That's not an issue, I want Amanda to grow up and know that she can be who she wants to be. She can look how she looks. And she's really self-confident, and she will go out and, wear her hair the way she wishes. And she knows that, if she has problems with it, we're here to support her.
So if she turns 18 and she comes home one day and says, Mom, I've decided to turn into a Mormon, that's no problem with you.
Yeah, we might not be too happy, but Amanda has been taught from really little on to respect everyone's beliefs, and she can choose whatever path she wants. She's been told that repeatedly over and over. All of the kids have. Especially because of the fact that we're very eclectic too. We're not sticking in, an Alexandrian path alone. So she's been taught to appreciate all the different pagan, paths and traditions. So, we've also put in there, the fact that there are Christians out there, and all the different other religions that are around. So she's real open-minded, and encourage her to study. If she cares to study Christianity, that would be great. If that's what she decides to do, that's fine. We just want her to be happy. Jamin, my little son, his grandparents are very Catholic. They're Hispanic people, and they're extremely firm in their beliefs. And so when Jamin was born, we had his Wiccan dedication, and he also was baptized in a Catholic church for his grandmother's sake. She's very firm in her beliefs, and so we've taught him to respect that too. We wanted her to feel secure that her baby was going to go to heaven if he dies. That was a real important issue with her. She also takes him to church, the Catholic church, once in a while on Sundays. And we've taught him, to believe, what he cares, and take the important things out of everyone's belief. The things that work for you. If he decides to be Catholic, that's fine with us.